MSW Media. Thanks to ExpressVPN for supporting the show. ExpressVPN is an app that reroutes your internet connection through their secure servers, so your ISP can't see the sites you visit. Go to expressvpn.com/cleanup and get an extra 3 months free.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's cleanup on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be cleanup on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 182 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. It is Wednesday, July 17th, the end of the world. No, 2024. Hello, I'm Allison Gill.
Yeah, not far from it. I'm Pete Strzok. We all know by now that Judge Cannon has dismissed the entire espionage and obstruction case in Florida. Trump is still trying to undermine his charges in Manhattan. We'll cover that today, along with the legal risks for Trump attending the Republican National Convention right now, which kicked off earlier on Monday.
Yes, and a reminder to everyone, we're recording this on Monday afternoon, so if anything happens on Tuesday, which it has to, given the news these days, we do apologize. It will make it into the bonus episode this weekend. We will also today cover Rudy's bankruptcy case being dismissed, which is really good news, and the D.C. Circuit throwing out Jeff Clark's bid to transfer his disbarment case to federal court, which is also good news. And a Russian AI bot farm has been busted by the DOJ, also good news. But first, we have new patrons to thank. And right now, your support is more critical than ever because the mainstream media has lost its ever-loving mind. So thank you so much for supporting us. Contessa de la Luna, Jens Eilstrup Rasmussen, Winter Witch, North Carolina, or NC, maybe that stands for something other than North Carolina, Guy Stevens, Bob Reed, Maureen, Carrie Shevelson, and MG. So thank you again so much. We couldn't do this without you, and I'm planning another get-together in D.C. fairly soon. And, of course, Pete Strzok, Andy McCabe, Glenn Kirshner, I think Brian Greer is coming, and me. We'll all be live in D.C. on August 16th. There are a few tickets still available. You're going to want to grab them. Stay for the weekend. Maybe we'll have a meet and greet, a get-together for patrons, if you're a patron of this show. It's going to be an incredible show to be at the Hamilton Theater, so I'm really excited about it. I just want to let everybody know that the Judge Cannon dismissal of the espionage and obstruction superseding indictment against Trump, Nauta, and De Oliveira, that has been covered in depth on an emergency episode of the Jack podcast with me and Andy McCabe, which is out now. Should have come out Monday night. So you can hear Andy and I discuss this ruling, plus all the possible ways forward for the case for the Department of Justice. But before we shift to the RNC real quick here, because the breaking news is that we just learned J.D. Vance is the vice presidential nominee picked by Donald Trump earlier in the morning. Burgum and Rubio got the news that it wasn't going to be them. But let's talk about Cannon for a minute, because, I'm always interested in your opinion on these things that we do go over on Jack in detail. Like, we go through the legal filing and the possibilities, but I'm really curious of all of the ways that this can be resolved or countered. What do you have a favorite way of what a favorite thing that Jack Smith should do here?
Look, I don't know which way he's going to go. I mean, there were some weird things, and I obviously haven't listened yet to your emergency pod, but it is interesting that given oral argument, she appeared to be so hesitant about some of Trump's attorneys' arguments with regard to the inappropriateness of the special counsel, that I think a lot of observers were expecting her not to do this. And the other thing to keep in mind is, like, I mean, this is a long opinion. You just don't sit down over the weekend and write this. There's a lot of effort that went into it. So it's all odd. The Clarence Thomas dropping his little note in the Supreme Court opinion on Trump is odd. But, for me, I think there's little doubt that the government will appeal. I think there are a lot of problems if they were to try it in Washington, D.C. when it comes to some of the strongest counts, or the obstruction counts that occurred after he left the White House, coupled with some of his immunity, based on what's coming out of the Supreme Court. A lot of his president-related actions up to and through the loadout at the last days of his presidency, I think, make D.C. problematic. Whether or not Jack Smith can take this to the 11th Circuit and not only appeal it, but say, I want her replaced, she can always sit and point to, like, well, I got a Supreme Court justice who says this is not an unreasonable interpretation. Right. So if I had to guess, they appeal to the 11th Circuit. They do not ask for her to get removed. The 11th Circuit stays her dismissal. That is then buttressed by the Supreme Court staying the dismissal and saying, okay, we're going to calendar argument on this next term. So it essentially stalls out, anything until 2025. It's going away. It was going to go away anyway if Trump is elected again. And if not, we've got, a couple of years of litigation coming down the pike. It's just, in my opinion, she's a hack. Any good faith actor who could sit there and try and argue that, oh, she's just been cautious. She's not. She's in the tank for Trump. She's ignoring binding circuit opinion and, behaving like an appellate judge rather than a district court judge. And you've already got Matt Gaetz out there talking about, Supreme Court for her. So it's rather, it's discouraging, but not surprising.
Well, she writes this is a case of first impression for the 11th Circuit. There is no binding 11th Circuit precedent, but there is Supreme Court precedent and 8 other federal judges precedent. But, it's going to make it harder, I think, for Jack Smith to argue to get her thrown off the case, just for being a dick, because there's no 11th Circuit binding precedent. And just like you said, Clarence Thomas told me to. Right in his immunity concurrence, which had nothing to do with immunity and nobody asked for, which I find very interesting. There's another possibility if you file these in D.C. that you narrow it to obstruction and kick out the espionage charges. Then there's, because they obstructed the grand jury in D.C. But then there's also the possibility of not appealing this and just taking your case, having the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Florida file the charges, and everybody with Jack Smith have them go work alongside the U.S. attorney, because we don't have to worry about whether or not the U.S. attorney was appointed and confirmed by Congress, because they were. So that's another possibility. But you have a pretty good chance of drawing Judge Cannon again. Now, I haven't found out what the odds are. We know that Charlie Savage wrote a big piece in the New York Times last year about the odds of drawing Judge Cannon the first time. It was 1 in 4, and it was because several of the senior judges in the district had met their case quota. So when you become a senior judge, you only take a handful of cases, and once you hit that quota of cases that you are supposed to take every term, you don't get to take any more cases. You're no longer on the wheel of judges to be spun to figure out who's going to be the judge in the case, presiding over the case. And at the time last year, Middlebrooks was assigned over to a different district and was only taking cases there because it was a much busier district. And so that narrowed the 26 judges down to 4. And that's how you ended up with Cannon. And so, I don't know what the odds are right now. I don't know how many senior judges have maxed out their caseload this term. And I don't see anyone, including Charlie Savage, having written anything up on the chances of a refiled case by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida drawing Judge Cannon again. Because if you draw her again, you're right back where you were.
Yeah, and a lot of this comes down to local rules, and by that I mean that each district court has a slight difference in the way that they go about assigning cases, and in particular things about related cases come into play. And so if there's an argument that, well, there is related case type litigation either in prior things like the search warrant and the appointment and overturning of a special master, and there's some argument about, well, for judicial efficiency she's already held. And that's the other crazy thing is, like, I think Hugo Lowell or somebody listed out like all of the motions she held argument on and never issued an opinion. There's a lot of work done, so you can make an argument for judicial efficiency that she didn't speak to that at all, and so to the extent this has already been briefed, it would be more efficient to continue with her. I don't think it's out of the realm of strong possibility that they could file and go right back to her. And if you don't do that, I do think there's a risk that it looks like you're judge shopping if you move up to Washington, D.C. I think some of the strongest you might be able to pull in as related conduct some of the things that Trump was doing. I mean, in my opinion, some of the strongest evidence that the government appears to have is, Trump telling, asking and whatnot, walking around with Delaver and other folks looking at where the cameras are and asking for footage to be deleted. I mean, there's extraordinarily strong evidence of obstruction there. And whether or not you could tie that into a DC-based set of charges comes with some problems. So again, I don't think any of us before today expected this trial to occur before the election. So this isn't a surprise. I do think, there's some argument, and I read some of what you were saying on Twitter that, whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing to give to Donald Trump on the opening of the RNC, in my opinion, it gets the attempted assassination off of the one and only topic for discussion. It gets and provides an opportunity for people in the media to talk about his gross mishandling of classified information, to talk about his obstruction, to talk about his endangering national security that, had she not done it, I think might have been a little bit harder. But, this BS about, we need to calm the tone when, tuning in today, Monday, as we tape, and you got the entire, and we'll talk about who some of the delegates are at the RNC, but, the entire crowd sitting there doing fight, 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 which of course was Donald Trump when he got up to speak to the crowd after being injured, was not everybody tame your passions. It was a clenched fist coupled with a little, hand outstretched, palm down, of fight, 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 which is what the delegates are saying now. So, blessedly, this flirtation by some in the media of like, oh, Trump's turned over a new leaf. He's a uniter. And no, he's not. He is the same person he's been for 70 odd years. He is a grossly self-interested person, singularly inappropriate to go anywhere near the presidency of the United States. So at least this gives us the opportunity to discuss one of the many, many, many reasons why.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it speaks toward, setting your sights on the election later on, that not only do we have a corrupt criminal who could be a king and will exploit the immunity ruling, but now we have somebody who is careless with our national security information and was not, and that case was thrown out. I think that kind of makes a better case for why you would want to elect President Biden, who was exonerated of that. And now we don't even get to see, as far as we know, at this point, we might not even get to see. We definitely won't before the election, but will we ever get to see a case against Donald Trump and his obstruction and retention of national defense information? But let's talk about the RNC for a minute, because, and, we've covered kind of ad nauseum the shooting at the Trump rally. We covered on the Beans. I know we talked about it on our bonus episode. There really isn't any new additional information other than the FBI has accessed the phone of the shooter and they don't see any other clear motive in there. So they're still investigating. But I wanted to talk about the convention because Kyle Cheney at Politico brought up a pretty good point. I think it'll go ignored, but what did Kyle Cheney write about?
So what Kyle said was, this is from him, Donald Trump will be rubbing elbows in Milwaukee with a crowd that may include dozens of witnesses and alleged co-conspirators in his criminal cases, people he has sworn not to communicate with about details of the charges against him. Avoiding them may not be possible for the former president during the 4-day convention, creating an unusual dynamic and a potential legal liability for Trump. against the backdrop of a national nominating convention. And so that's what caused us to say, let me go out on a extraordinary limb here and say, ain't nothing going to happen. I have some curious, seriously, how many people out on bail are attending this convention, whether as a delegate
how many people
or as
are under
a
indictment?
Candidate.
Yeah.
How many people
As
are
a
under
delegate.
indictment? How many? Yes, right? Like, I would love some speaker to sit there and say, everybody who is out on bail, raise your hand. Because truly, there would be, at least by my count, easily approaching 10 when you look at, or more, when you look at the number of states who have put false electors who have been charged onto their state delegate count. But nothing's going to happen, Allison. This is not, he shouldn't be talking to him about I didn't talk to anybody about the charges. Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's really hard to prove, but there they are. And, Michon Maddock, we found out from Craig Uniger. Is that how you say his last name? I'm not even sure. But a very, very good local reporter in Michigan, that Michon Maddock has been taken the place of one of the delegates. So she's under indictment. And that's just one of, like you said, of probably 10 or more. It's a gathering of it's a criminal convention is what it is.
Yeah. And, one last thought, and we'll talk about it some more. America, you need to get to know J.D. Vance. And one thing, and this is like up on his website right now, and I'll quote from it. I am 100% pro-life and believe that abortion has turned our society into a place where we see children as an inconvenience to be thrown away rather than a blessing to be nurtured. Eliminating abortion is first and foremost about protecting the unborn, but it's also about making our society more pro-child and pro-family. The historic Dobbs decision puts this new era of society into motion. So that's J.D. Vance, folks. One aspect of a lot of different policy positions that I think are going to be pretty interesting when people start unpacking that and looking at what that means. He's no dummy. I mean, he's an extraordinarily bright individual. I think in many ways, what he could do is pretty scary.
Yeah, he's a frightening figure. Definitely a white nationalist. I'm just hoping the Democrats continue to run all of the clips of him saying how terrible Trump is. That Trump is the Hitler for America. I hope that we really kind of focus on that, and also Project 2025. And of course, you don't want to elect somebody who's going to abuse the office and turn it into the seat of criminal activity in the United States, which he would do, which is what Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson warned against. All right, here's a little bit of good news from the Department of Justice. I thought that this would be right up in your wheelhouse. The department announced the seizure of 2 domain names and the search of 968, about 1,000 social media accounts used by Russian actors to create an AI-enhanced social media bot farm that spread disinformation in the U.S. and abroad. The social media bot farm used elements of AI to create fictitious social media profiles, often purporting to be individuals in the United States, which the operators then used to promote messages in support of Russian government objectives, according to affidavits unsealed. In conjunction with the domain seizures and the search warrant announced today, the FBI and the Cyber National Mission Force, CNMF, in partnership with Canada and the Netherlands, released a joint cybersecurity advisory detailing the technology behind the social media bot farm, including details regarding how the bot farm's creators leveraged their bespoke AI systems in furtherance of the scheme. The advisory will allow social media platforms and researchers to identify and prevent the Russian government's further use of the technology. In addition, Twitter voluntarily suspended the remaining bot accounts identified in the court documents for terms of service violations. So, you remember good old Concord Management and Yevgeny Prigozhin's bot farm that was indicted by Robert Mueller. Those were individual human people who sat in a place, in a building, and spread their disinformation and misinformation and sowed chaos in the United States election. Now they're just generating them with AI.
Yeah, and what was interesting is I was reading this big expose by Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger talking about how the U.S. government. Who am I kidding? There was no there was no write up by some Twitter files expose about actually foreign governments, hostile foreign governments, actually do engage in clandestine activities on social media platforms that are discovered by democratic governments, and that information is shared with those social media companies in a responsible way. And then those independent private social media companies on their own choose to take action in some cases to remove that foreign activity. Now, you will not, if you subscribe to Matt Taibbi or Michael Schellenberger, I guarantee you will not find the first word about this activity in terms of what actual governments do in a bad way in the social media environment, nor will you find how governments, our own, acts appropriately to preserve the public interest. But the fact of the matter is it's there. A bunch of people have been indicted. A bunch of entities have been indicted. And this is exactly the kind of reason that reasonable, responsible government, private industry contact in the social media environment is entirely appropriate and a good thing, which is why you will not hear any of these folks. You will not hear Jim Jordan. You will not hear James Comer. You will not hear anybody. You will not hear Elon say a damn thing about this because it kind of shoots down the blather that we've been hearing out of the damn pie holes for the past 18 months.
Yeah. And before we go to break, I just want to say that while I'm exceedingly glad that I get to host this podcast with you, and I think you're an invaluable member as a talking head and a pundit on cable news, and same with Andy. These are the days that I'm sad that you're no longer at the Bureau. I mean, I'm really glad that the Department of Justice has found this, but I can't imagine the depth and scope of the insidious new utilization of bespoke AI to attack us. And these are the days that I am sad that folks like you are no longer at the Bureau protecting us from these things.
Yeah.
I know you can't really say anything about that.
You and me both.
I'm just like, I am sad I'm no longer at the Department of Veterans Affairs protecting veterans. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. We do have to take a quick break. We have a lot more to get to. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, it's AG. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone. Most of the time, you might be okay, but all it takes is one slip up and you'll regret not spending a few extra bucks on that added protection. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network, whether it's in a cafe or a hotel or an airport or other public places, your online data is vulnerable. Any hacker on the same network can easily steal your personal information like passwords, bank logins, credit card details, and it doesn't take much technical skill. Even a smart 12-year-old with some cheap hardware can do it. Your data is valuable, fetching up to $1,000 per person on the dark web. ExpressVPN protects you by creating a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet, stopping hackers in their tracks. ExpressVPN's encryption is incredibly easy to use. Just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. It works on all devices, including phones, laptops, tablets, and more, ensuring you stay secure on the go no matter what device you're using. I once used ExpressVPN while traveling abroad to secure my online banking. It's personally important to me because I often work from public Wi-Fi spaces, as you know, and I need to ensure my sensitive data stays protected. ExpressVPN gives me peace of mind knowing my information is secure. So secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/cleanup. That's expressvpn.com/cleanup. And you can get an extra 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/cleanup.
And hey, welcome back. We've got more patrons to thank, including Gaia Canada, Daniel Stevenson, Cranky in AZ, Carla Lesher, Patricia, Robert Guillory, and KR. Apologies to anybody if I butchered your name, but thank all of you so much. Now more than
I would
ever.
also be cranky in Arizona.
Yeah.
It's the surface of the sun right now. It's incredibly hot, and all your rights are being taken away. But yeah,
right.
Thank you.
And Carrie Lake apparently still probably licking her wounds about not being selected for Donald Trump's vice presidential nominee. But thank all of you so much. Now more than
I
ever,
even
we've
forgot
got,
about her. Remember, she was back.
yeah, as has most of America, and hopefully it stays that way. But thank all of you so much. Critically important right now to get you the news, and you let us do that. Thanks for being part of the team. And with that, let's go up to New York, in Manhattan, where Trump has filed a motion for a new trial in the wake of the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. Now, this reporting comes from ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Former President Donald Trump has asked a New York judge to dismiss his criminal hush money case and vacate his conviction on 34 felony counts by arguing the trial was tainted by evidence and testimony that the Supreme Court's landmark ruling on presidential immunity now makes off limits. In a 52-page filing made public on the same day the former president was originally scheduled to be sentenced, Trump's lawyers argued that prosecutors violated the Supreme Court's immunity doctrine by using evidence related to official acts, including testimony from former White House aides, to fill, quote, glaring holes in their case, unquote. Continues, quote, because of the implications for the institution of the presidency, the use of official acts evidence was a structural error under the federal constitution that tainted the district attorney's grand jury proceedings as well as the trial, unquote, wrote defense lawyers Todd Blanche and Emile Bove. Trump's lawyers previewed their plan to request the verdict be tossed in a one-page letter to Judge Juan Merchan last week. In their motion today, outlined their argument why the Supreme Court's immunity ruling impacts the New York case, which largely centers on Trump's conduct as a presidential candidate to suppress negative information ahead of the 2016 election.
And this is interesting because there are different views on whether or not this will be successful. But the story goes on to say that Merchan opted to delay Trump's sentencing. We know from July 11th, pushed it to September 18th to consider briefings based on the Supreme Court's ruling. The Manhattan DA's office was given till July 24th to respond in writing. They have not yet commented. We'll bring that to you when they do. They haven't filed that. They haven't made their filing yet, filed their brief yet. Defense attorneys emphasized the importance of former White House Communications Director Hope Hicks's testimony, including her recounting of interactions with Trump in 2018 when reporting about alleged hush money payments to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels, and when that broke, to demonstrate Trump's knowledge of the payment and preference to the story that came out after and how he wanted the story to come out after the election. Now, Trump's lawyers argued that Hicks's testimony was categorically inadmissible because she was advising Trump on his official communications. And the Supreme Court's ruling placed limits on the use of testimony from presidential advisors related to official acts. Quote, the testimony concerned efforts by President Trump to work with Hicks to use the long-recognized aspect of presidential power, known as the bully pulpit, to persuade Americans, including by speaking forcefully or critically, in ways that the president believes would advance the public interest. The public interest. That's how he's trying to connect this. But of course, in the filing, he didn't say how having a discussion with Hope Hicks about his having sex with a porn star and trying to cover it up with hush money advances the public interest. Defense lawyers used a similar argument to say that tweets from Trump, which prosecutors used to demonstrate an alleged pressure campaign to prevent Trump lawyer Michael Cohen from cooperating, were official communications protected by immunity, because the posts fall well within the core authority of the nation's chief executive to tweet. Trump's lawyers also argued the Manhattan District Attorney's case and their theory required jurors to assess Trump's motive to actions while serving as president, an inquiry that the Supreme Court prohibited in their ruling. Defense lawyers argued that the case overall presents an affront to, among other things, core constitutional interests central in functioning of the federal government that irreparably encroached on the president's official actions. As a result, quote, the harms caused by the DA in New York and their course of action are irreparable. The appropriate remedy is dismissal. Now, this could be difficult for several reasons. Norm Eisen wrote a big op-ed about this that we talked about a little bit on the Daily Beans, because Trump actually did file earlier in this case a motion for presidential immunity, but not immune from prosecution. He was saying that his tweets and the evidence were immune. And the courts decided that that was not the case. And then Trump abandoned the appeal. He didn't appeal that denial from the court, which, according to Ambassador Norm Eisen, stops him from raising it again. However, there are new facts now. given the immunity ruling by the Supreme Court. So I'm not sure he's stopped. I don't know if abandoning an old appeal and then new facts come out, if that stops you from appealing on the same grounds, because there's new information. There's a new ruling that says communications like this are possibly immune. But the big glaring question, Pete, is these are private acts. There is no way that, well, I don't know about the Supreme Court, but that the New York courts will say that these could be considered official communications or official acts. I'm not sure how this is going to turn out. We will see what the briefings say once we get that briefing from the DA, and we'll have a better picture of how they're going to argue this by July 24th. We'll let you know what it says, but I am not sure about anything anymore.
Yeah, I don't know the ins and outs of New York state law to be able to tell you whether or not he's barred from raising this issue in the light of the new Supreme Court ruling. But I agree with you. The first thing that leaps out at me is, one, these things, even though they were discussions that took place in the White House while he was president, they concerned events that occurred prior to his presidency. So he was not the president. This was a continuation of things of trying to suppress the Stormy Daniels story. And these things that occurred later on while he was in the presidency were in furtherance of an act and a series of charged events that predated his presidency. So I have a real tough time trying to figure out how these are official in any way, shape, or form. It is not an official act to sit there and say things that I did during the course of my campaigning for the presidency in terms of, corruptly trying to shut up a story about me sleeping with a porn star. I don't see how that necessarily fully falls within what the Supreme Court said was immune. So we'll see. As you pointed out, we'll know soon enough. I expect, New York DA's office, who is an expert on New York state law, will put their response down, and we'll see it. And I think, again, the question in my mind is how long this is going to take to percolate through the New York state system and what we will or will not see prior to the election.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is by scheduling the sentencing on September 18th, it'll get through briefing and there will be a ruling. And if this court rules that he's not immune, and nor is any of his evidence, that sentencing will happen on September 18th, and it won't be precluded by any appeals prior to the election. There's not enough runway, according to the experts. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. And we'll know more. Like I said, Lynn, you said we'll have a clear picture by July 24th when we get the DA's argument. I assume they're going to argue that they might argue that he's stopped because he abandoned his appeal on these very issues. They may argue that these, and I'm sure they'll argue that these are not official acts, nor could they be considered official acts. And I'm pretty sure the New York court will agree with that because they already had. But whether or not that goes up and where it goes up and how it goes up is still up in the air. So we have to take another quick break. We still have more news. Everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. And we have more patrons to thank. These are more new patrons this week. And again, invaluable members of our team, y'all are, because right now, the media has kind of fallen apart. This morning, they yanked Morning Joe off the air.
Unbelievable.
Because they were concerned. Because they were concerned that, quote, the stable of guests they might bring in might say something that could hurt Trump's feelings, I guess, since he was shot at on Saturday. I don't know, but I've never seen that before. I think that's wild. And it calls into, into my memory, Dr. Timothy Snyder. I always quote Chapter 2, Defend Institutions, but he also said, don't obey in advance.
Yeah, well, maybe there's still time to go find Ronna McDaniel and hire her back so she can, take to the air. I went down, grabbed my cup of coffee, turned on Morning Joe, and they're like, and then saw quickly on Twitter, like, where is Morning Joe? But you know what I got instead of Morning Joe? And no offense against Jose, the guest, the host who was doing it. The first person I saw was Jason Miller going on about the new tone of reconciliation and unity from Donald Trump. Then there was a replay of Lindsey Graham providing some information. And then they had an interview, the Washington Examiner reporter who had spoken to Trump, and he was saying how this life-altering event of the attempted assassination had radically changed his perspective on life in general and his perception of leadership. It's not that, take Joe and Mika and, whoever they might have on there. It's the replacement was essentially a page out of Fox News. If I want to listen to Jason Miller, I'll go tune into Fox News. If I want to go hear from Lindsey Graham, I'll go to Newsmax. It's inconceivable to me, the amount of fretting, the amount of just cowardice and fear. Somebody might say, who that Mike Barnacle, he's that whoever it is, I don't know who they're worried about. But it is inconceivable to me, the level of fear and resignation and just defeatism across the board. And now we got Axios quoting, or whoever it was, some unnamed senior Democratic person saying we've all resigned ourselves to a trial. I haven't resigned myself. Nobody that I know has resigned ourselves. And so
when they say they say senior House Democrat, it might be like an old aide to somebody that we've never heard of. Like they don't say representative. They don't say chair of a committee. It's vague bullshit language being spread around. And I am kind of done. And in fact, I had to be told by a friend this morning that they yanked Morning Joe because I have to be honest, I haven't really watched cable news and in over a week or two, and I am somebody who has it on constantly in the background. So we cannot thank our patrons enough right now. And as Dahlia Lithwick said at the New York show, when we were doing the live thing, when somebody said, what do we need to prepare for? And she said, prepare to pay for your news, because pretty soon all free news is going to be 100% lies. So, and disinformation. And that's what we're headed toward. So the privatization of the news is complete. And I feel so bad because there are so many great reporters and anchors on these networks that I love. The problem is the tippy top, right? The conglomerates that own and operate everything. So we'll, I do my best to continue to bring the stories from people and sources that I trust. And we do that. We're able to do that because of our patrons. So thank you very much for, and here's the list. You got me with hot tea bag. Ian, Peter Silsby, Joan Carn or Carne, Jamie Overbaugh, Novotny family. Thank you, the Novotny family. And Katie Ware. Again, thank you so much. We can't do this without you. And it's especially crucial right now. So let's head to New York and let's talk about the bankruptcy court. Because we have an update on Rudy Giuliani and his creditors to bring a little smile to your face in the midst of all this madness. The creditors, including Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who won their $148 million judgment for defamation against the now permanently disbarred in New York and totally disgraced former mayor. And this comes from Graham Cates at CBS. A federal judge dismissed Rudy's bankruptcy protection case Friday, clearing the way for the creditors. And when I say creditors, I mean folks like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, to pursue foreclosures, repossessions, and other efforts to collect debt from the New York City mayor, former, and Trump advisor, probably also former. Giuliani himself asked for the dismissal on Wednesday after more than half a year of missing court deadlines amid allegations by lawyers for his creditors that he was evading questions about his finances. But before that, he wanted liquidation. And it was actually the creditors who were fighting for the dismissal. He filed for bankruptcy after a federal jury in December held him liable for defaming the two Georgia election workers and awarded $148 million in damages. Giuliani spread lies tying the election workers, as we know, Freeman and Moss, to a wider conspiracy he pushed and continues to champion, claiming without evidence that the former president lost the 2020 election due to fraud, widespread fraud, determinative fraud. The dismissal will allow Giuliani to pursue an appeal of the defamation case. U.S. bankruptcy judge Sean Lane previously barred Giuliani from doing so while his Chapter 11 reorganization was ongoing. Lane criticized Giuliani for a lack of transparency about his finances during the proceedings. Same thing that happened with the case down in the lower court, right? Or in the Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss case. And the judge wrote Friday, quote, "He has not even retained an accountant. which is the most rudimentary of steps. Such a failure is a clear red flag, unquote. And, quote, Giuliani has failed to provide an accurate and complete picture of his financial affairs in the 6 months this case has been pending, he said. And Giuliani is barred from, again, pursuing bankruptcy protection for an entire year. So that was also something the judge wrote.
So sad. A spokesperson for Giuliani criticized what they called, quote, voluminous and overly broad discovery requests in the case in a statement to CBS News, continuing, "We will continue to pursue justice, and we are confident that, in the long run, our system of justice will be restored and the mayor will be totally vindicated," said the spokesperson Ted Goodman. Complete exoneration. Giuliani's credit. Yeah, total and complete exoneration. Giuliani's creditors accused him during the bankruptcy case of hiding assets and using the bankruptcy process to slow down collection. They pointed on Monday to what they termed a, quote, completely incongruous series of recent filings by Giuliani. He requested on June 17th an extension to file a reorganization plan. Got to shift around those two turntables on a microphone. Crucial to showing a judge the plan for repaying debts. Then, on July 1st, Giuliani filed a motion to liquidate his assets, giving control to an independent trustee. On Wednesday, he turned the case upside down when he announced he was seeking its dismissal. Giuliani's financial problems have peaked as his legal troubles have piled up. He's entered not guilty pleas to charges in Georgia and Arizona, stemming from his alleged efforts to undermine the 2020 presidential election results. Giuliani, a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, as well as the mayor of New York City, was disbarred from practicing law in the state on July 2nd. Board in Washington, D.C. recently recommended in May that he be disbarred there as well. And I would note, despite all of this, Rudy still has either enough resources or enough largesse from the public somewhere to show up in Milwaukee, where he recently was seen posing with a bunch of police officers in front of the RNC convention site, which just, come on. The guy's a broke disgrace, and he is trying to hide assets, in my opinion, from any number of folks, including people like, Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman, who absolutely deserve to get that. And they have every one of my best wishes to collect on some of that.
Yeah. So just a reminder, Rudy Giuliani is indicted in 2 jurisdictions. He's disbarred in New York. He'll probably be disbarred in DC, and he's bankrupt. So way to go from former U.S. attorney of probably the biggest U.S. attorney's office in the country and former mayor of New York City, to and then twice indicted, disbarred, bankrupt, disgrace. I mean, wow.
Yep.
I never liked the guy. I hated him before it was cool. But it's quite a fall. That's quite a fall. All right, we have to take another break. We still have more news to get to. Everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back to Cleanup on Aisle 45. We have our last batch of new patrons to thank, including Maynard Linder, Diane Ellingsworth, Ophelia Chang, Trisha Hutchins, Bruce Slavin, Tass, T-A-S, and Medic That Loves Texas. Can someone please come get these Republicans out of here? I thank all of you so much for your support. Thank you. We can't do this show without you. And again, absolute thanks to your support and being part of the team. And so let's stay, in New York and go back to Manhattan to discuss an update on the bid by Trump to undermine the $454 million disgorgement for business fraud entered by Judge Engoron. Now, this comes from Jose Pagliari at Notus, or Notus. Donald Trump's desperate search for a smoking gun to tank his bank fraud judgment continues, this time with an attempt to question a lawyer who crossed paths with the New York judge who hit Trump with a $500 million judgment. New York Justice Arthur F. Engoron, under pressure to appear as impartial as possible, green-lighted Trump's request to subpoena a lawyer who publicly admitted he tried to offer, quote-unquote, unsolicited advice to the judge weeks before the order came down.
Yeah, and you'll remember we talked about this. Remember the rando guy who spoke with Judge Engoron and told him to go easy on Trump?
Right. He did.
Yeah.
Judge Engoron did not look for him. The guy sought out Engoron and gave, again, this unsolicited advice. Now, back in May, NBC reported about this and said that Adam Lateman Bailey, who's a real estate lawyer who once had his bar license suspended,
Of course,
randomly approached the judge to let him, quote, know what I think and why. I really want him to get it right, unquote. According to the source who spoke to Not Us or Notice, Bailey hurriedly approached the judge as Engoron was making his way through the courthouse and muttered something about the statutes at issue in the case. And you'll also keep in mind, you're right, we did talk about it. And one of the things that that Bailey was trying to convince Engoron to do was to take it easy on Trump. He wasn't trying to throw the book at Trump. He wasn't telling him that he was, well within his rights to fight against Trump. He was trying to get him to take it easy. He was a fan, an advocate for Trump.
And I thought this was a sit-down meeting or a lunch or something, but the new news here is that he approached the judge as he was walking through the courthouse and just muttered something about the statute at issue in the case. This reminds me so much of the little shit gibbon with the little weasel. The little racist weasel? Jeff Sessions. I did not have any meetings with the Russians. I don't know anything because we found out he didn't technically lie to Congress because he only talked to the Russians like in a walk and talk down a hallway at the Mayflower. He didn't actually sit down. I guess that's the criteria for a meeting is that you put your butt in a chair. But yeah, that's what this reminds me of. So it wasn't even a meeting. He scurried up to him in a hallway and told him to take it easy on Trump.
Muttered something like Boomhauer in King of the Hill. It's absurd. Pagliari continues. Last month, Trump's legal team subpoenaed Bailey and demanded that he fork over copies of any and all communications he's ever had with the judge or his staff, a demand that Engoron found to be an, quote, improper wholesale fishing expedition, unquote. The judge noted that Bailey is involved in other cases before the court that have nothing to do with the Trump fraud trial that concluded earlier this year. Now, on Tuesday, Engoron narrowed down the subpoena, but still allowed Trump's legal team to question the lawyer about any communications he's had with the judge about this case. In his order, Engoron recognized the weird nature of the event and concluded, quote, the subpoena is not wholly without merit, quote. Mr. Bailey is directed to furnish all responsive documents to the subpoena, Engoron wrote. However, no additional documents are actually expected, given that Bailey simply approached the judge in person, according to a person familiar with the situation, which I would take to be either Mr. Bailey or Judge Engoron, and I don't think Judge Engoron is giving comments to Jose Pagliari. But nevertheless, Trump's legal maneuvering here, albeit inconsequential to the case at large, shows how his lawyers are trying to find anything that could cause controversy in the case. The nearly $500 million judgment against Trump and two of his sons, Don Jr. and Eric, threatens to cripple his finances at a time when the business mogul is undergoing a cash crunch. And with every passing day, the total keeps climbing, with mounting interest that is ballooning the overall judgment. The case is currently on appeal in New York's State Appellate Court. I see next to no merit here. I think Engoron, like he's done throughout, is being extraordinarily careful to make a record that is appeal-proof. But it's just like everything else Trump does. I have never seen somebody so blessed with luck in his life.
He fails up all the time, doesn't he?
Every single time. And in the legal environment as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next, there will be a motion to dismiss the case because Judge Engoron traded baseball cards with a Democrat in 1974. I just want to put that out there, just so you know. All right. Next up, I'm kidding, by the way. This is from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. This appeal concerns whether Jeffrey B. Clark, environmental lawyer, a former United States Department of Justice official, can remove to federal court under either the federal officer or general removal statute to the District of Columbia bar's disciplinary proceedings against him. They want to remove the D.C. bar proceedings. He wants to remove them to federal court. saying he's a federal officer, or the general removal statute. The District of Columbia Bar initiated disciplinary proceedings against Clark based on actions he took while employed at the DOJ. The D.C. Bar's Office of Disciplinary Counsel charged that Clark attempted to engage in dishonesty and obstruction of the administration of justice when he credited debunked claims of irregularities with the 2020 presidential election and recommended that federal and state officials take specified actions on the unsupported premise that Biden had not been validly elected. Those charges were pending before the D.C. Court of Appeals Board of Professional Responsibility when Clark removed to federal court 3 matters related to that disciplinary proceeding. First, the D.C. Bar's disciplinary hearing initiated under D.C. Bar Rule 11. Second, a petition to enforce an October 26, 2022 subpoena against Clark as part of the D.C. Bar proceedings. And third, a second subpoena issued on December 18th, 2022, as to which the D.C. Bar's Office of Disciplinary Counsel did not seek judicial enforcement. The district court held that none of those matters was removable and remanded them to the Board of Professional Responsibility. We conclude that both the October 26th subpoena enforcement proceeding and the December 18th subpoena are moot, so there's nothing left to remove. For Clark's bar disciplinary proceeding itself, we hold that even if that proceeding were removable, Clark's notice of removal was untimely. Womp womp. So we accordingly affirm. So the ruling doesn't get into the substance, noting Clark's removal petition was untimely and that the other 2 things were moot. So moot, and too late. That's what they've decided. What do you think?
I think there is nothing ahead for Jeff Clark except for a future Trump administration where he'll get some functionary role somewhere in the government. I don't expect him to be attorney general, but I can see him doing some random task within DOJ. But God almighty. I mean, this pattern of people who just stumble pathetically through the legal system, through the bar disciplinary process, and whether it's Rudy, whether it's Clark, whether it's John Eastman, whether it's Jenna Godlover Ellis, it just at some point stop. Just you've already debased yourself, and at some point, I don't know, it becomes pathetic in a way that do you have any shred of dignity whatsoever left? Just stop. Just take your medicine and be a little bit defiant if you really want to be defiant, but stop this silly, embarrassing groveling.
Yeah, and you know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for some sort of filing from Jeff Clark saying, my conversations are immune, according to the latest Supreme Court ruling, even though that is from criminal prosecution and not bar proceedings. But we may see some kind of an appeal on that ground, you know?
Yeah, and some of that is like, I haven't gone through the disciplinary transcripts to see how much involved his discussions with people at, his conversations with, say, Jeffrey Rosen or other people at DOJ are not immune. His conversations directly with Trump, there might be some argument, but those are few and far between compared to like, when he had his conversation with Eric, what's his name, and said, hey, look, when there's an oil spill, we'll call you. Those conversations are not immune. So I think it's a tall, I'm sure he'll try, but again, it's just stop. You're gumming. And the other thing is like this, these entities don't exist solely to cater to the needs of the Rudy Giulianis and the Jeffrey Clarks. There are any number of other cases, whether they are bar cases, whether they are civil or criminal cases, that the resources of our judiciary system need to be applied to. And this is just wasting them needlessly and frivolously. But, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. All right, that is the news that we have for you today. There's going to be a lot more, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. And thank you again to all of our new patrons for helping us and, to bring all this news to you in these crucial times. But we will have a bonus episode. And I know our bonus episode this past week was late. We are sorry about that. There was just so much going on. But we were able to eventually get it out to you there on Sunday. So thanks for being patient. And there will be one also this weekend. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
I do not. Buckle in and see what the convention looks like. I noted they have this new era of reconciliation. They invited the candidate for North Carolina governor, the person who I think a month or so ago said, I'm just going to say it, some people need to be killed. That's the tone and tenor of reconciliation and unification that Trump and his party are bringing to the floor right now as we speak on tape on Monday. So I can only guess what's going to happen. I think we have a OnlyFans porn influencer perhaps coming on deck to speak, and gosh knows what other surprises await.
Yeah, we'll see. And we'll bring it all to you. And thanks to all the support we get from you. And even just listening to the program really helps and makes a difference. And subscribing for free on Apple Podcasts helps bump us up in the charts where we can, beat Ben Shapiro or whatever. Those are always fun days. So thanks for that. Everybody, we'll see you this week on the bonus episode for patrons and next week for public listeners. Thank you so much. What was that?
What we can beat? Who we can beat? We can beat Steve Bannon in the war room because Steve can't tape.
Oh, that's too bad.
Sad.
And pretty soon InfoWars will be way ahead of them as well. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back in your ears soon. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.